and bring to you members of NAVA, Carlos Morales-Ramírez, originally from Puerto Rico, who is a PhD candidate in biogeography at the University of Singapore. He joined NAVA in 2015 and won the Captain William Driver Award in 2017. Carlos is presenting of Singaporean Vexillology, Flag Knowledge in Southeast Asia's Lion City. Carlos, turn it over to you.
Stan mentioned, my name is Carlos Morales-Ramírez. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Singapore. I'm also a professor at the University of Puerto Rico in Aguadilla. I teach geography and social sciences courses. And today I'm going to share with you some of the results of research I did. I think it was 2017, 2018. But this is the first time the results of that research are being presented. So hopefully you're in for a treat. We're going to talk about flag knowledge in Singapore, basically. Just so you guys follow along, I'm going to start with a brief introduction about the topic. This will give you an idea of where my research was going for. I'll talk a little bit about our study area, which is Singapore. Then I'll share a little bit about the methods and the materials that I use. I'll discuss some of the results, and then what do those results mean with the discussion and the conclusions, and obviously next steps, because we're definitely not done with this topic. Some of this information may not be new to most of you in this group, but it is important to highlight that a flag is a nation's primary cultural identification. It represents, among many other things, a country's idiosyncrasies and values. And obviously they convey different messages to different individuals, that we have seen with some of the discussions that we have had in the previous panels and presentations before. But the main focus that I want to show here is nationalism, because for the most part, we definitely see that flag allow individuals to show that sense of nationalism. In many individuals, a flag can create a sense of belonging. It could be symbolic to their birthplace. And overall, a lot of this research understanding a little bit of the power and meaning that flags have in individuals may be a little bit small. As of right now, as Scott Winter concluded in his 2015 studies, this is definitely something that could help advance some of these areas in vexillology that are still not fully explored. So I also wanted to add a little bit of that into the vexillology research. Scott Winter is not the only scientist or scholar or vexillologist that has concluded this. Social scientists as Fosdar and colleagues have also seen that individuals displaying the flag of their country tend to display a higher level or a higher sense of nationalism and patriotism. So it's always good to see this dynamic and how it occurs in different countries, specifically in these countries in East and Southeast Asia. Again, maybe not new information to most of you, but we know that flags act as symbols of unification for the most part. We do have exceptions to that. But for the most part, it allows individuals to feel like they belong. It reminds them that this is the place that they are coming from. And as a Puerto Rican, and I'm sure you have seen a lot of Puerto Ricans display the flag, we are very, very patriotic when it comes to our flag. So it's always interesting to see how that dynamic works in other locations. My approach specifically came from Michael Billings' terminology that he started working on after 1995, when he started talking about banal nationalism, where he discussed that this type of nationalism ties in a little bit into patriotism, because this type of nationalism is linked to everyday representations. So individuals tend to be more nationalistic or more patriotic when they are exposed to these symbols, such as the flag. And Michael Billing, or Billig, there's no N there, apologies, stated that these ideologies and individuals actually strengthen their identities when they are exposed to symbols such as the flag. That sentiment of patriotism becomes even higher or more pronounced. And we saw that specifically in the United States. I'm happy that someone, apologies, too many presenters. It was a really nice Vexy bit about the flag of freedom. We saw that with the display of the flag of freedom after the 9/11 events that unfolded into the United States, where we saw a larger display of flags in the United States after those events. So that is what Michael Billing was talking about. He was describing this patriotism as valuable because it actually builds on a well-being, on the well-being of individuals within a nation. So taking all of that into consideration, again, going back to what that banal nationalism talks about, which is basically including the use of flags in sporting events and national songs. Our previous presenter talked about the flags in money, the flag in popular expression. Taking all of that into consideration, I wanted to see and understand what was the level of flag knowledge in Singapore, and understand a little bit of their sense of pride or nationalism towards their national flags, and more to come on why I chose Singapore. But let's talk about Singapore as our study area. So Singapore is an island nation in Southeast Asia. So you have countries here like China, you have India, and Singapore's right there south of the Malaysian Peninsula. It has a population of 5.7 million inhabitants as of 2019, so definitely a very densely populated country. Based on their ethnic groups, which are the Chinese, the Malay, and the Indians, they have 4 official languages, although the one that is spoken throughout the country for the most part, it is English, because they used to be a British colony. But they also have Bahasa Malay, or Malaysian language, or however else we know the Malaysian language, Mandarin, and Tamil, which is an Indian language, as their official languages. And the reason why I chose Singapore is I started doing my PhD in Singapore in 2016, and I think the first thing I saw was their display of flags, which really blew my mind, and we're going to see a picture of that soon. So as a vexillologist, I'm sure all of you will have that same experience that I had when I stepped foot in Singapore, and I just saw the overload of flags. And again, I'm Puerto Rican. I know all about having that Puerto Rican flag everywhere, but I think they beat us, at least when they display the flag often, which I will discuss in the presentation. So just a little bit of quick history. Singapore adopted their current flag in 1959, hoisting it for the first time on December 3rd, 1959, although they officially became an independent nation or a sovereign nation in 1965. So they still use that flag that was adopted. Some parts of the flag, we have that red band there symbolizing the equality of man and universal brotherhood. We have the white, which stands for pervading and everlasting virtue and purity. We have the 5 lovely stars here, which represent Singapore's ideals, which are peace, progress, democracy, justice, and equality. And we have the crescent moon, which, unlike most of the flags that we know that use the crescent moon, for the Singaporean flag, it actually represents Singapore as being a young nation. Okay, so the juxtaposition of strong symbolisms of the Singaporean flag and the guidelines established by the National Heritage Board allow the country's residents to associate the flag with obedience and benevolence. I think Scott Winter also wrote a really good article summarizing a lot of this in 1999. So if you're interested, I didn't go into detail like he did in my paper because we were looking at two different things. But if you're interested in more of that, you can certainly reference Scott Winter's articles. But you're going to see that he also references this strictness that the National Heritage Board has around displaying and using the Singapore flag. So it's really interesting to see the dynamic because as I shared, when I moved to the country, it was towards the end of July. So I saw this array of flags everywhere. It's like overload of flags. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the capital of vexillology. This is the origin. Is this what Whitney Smith saw that got him inspired to develop all of that? But then as I lived there longer, I realized, oh, it's because of the National Day celebrations, which they're not just a day. They last 2 months, but it goes through July 1st through September 30th. And during this time, everyone is encouraged to display the Singapore flag. Outside of this period, if you are an individual at your house, you're not allowed to display the flag during sporting events. There are specific guidelines on how you can use the flag, but for the most part, you're not going to see the display of the Singaporean flag, even during national sports event, the way that we would see like in the FIFA World Cup and these major events. So taking all of that into consideration, I wanted to see then, okay, so these individuals are told you only have this specific period of time to display your flag. So how well do you know your flag? Is this period enough for you to feel that attached to your flag and show this nationalism or this banal nationalism that Michael Billick was talking about? I started conducting a research first with students at the National University of Singapore in the Department of Geography, mainly because being a foreigner in Singapore, it would have been a little bit controversial for me to just go out on the streets as I could do here in the US and just start handing out surveys or asking people questions about flag and things like that. And also all of this research was approved by the internal review board of the university. So all ethical considerations were taken into place when conducting this survey. So basically, the students were asked knowledge-based questions about the country's flag and what it meant to them. And these results were calculated and presented in percentages to start understanding a little bit of that connection between that flag knowledge and how individuals felt towards their flag and that sense of nationalism. Singapore is a country that attracts a lot of international students, so only the results from Singaporean students were considered. Obviously, that's what we're focusing on. This is basically how the questionnaire looked like. In total, it had 10 questions because the questions were repeated again, asking them about their subnational or municipal or city flag. But I wasn't expecting any Singaporean to answer questions 6 through 10 because they know they only have their national flag. But I still included 10 just for those international students that I knew I was going to get. Don't worry, I'll discuss the questions as I go through. So a total of 113 students participated and completed this questionnaire. But again, we're only taking into consideration Singaporean students. So out of those, 81 are the results that we are going to discuss in this presentation and in this paper. I was actually pretty satisfied with the distribution in terms of gender, although that's not something I was really looking at. I honestly think I added this just for formality purposes, and we can discuss why there's not an other field to allow individuals to answer other things in a later conversation. But just so you can have an idea, you can see how it was almost evenly distributed. So out of those, the first question asked them, do you know the Singaporean flag? I was pleasantly surprised to see that all of them said yes, but of course I'm not going to take their word for it, not because I doubt them, but because this is scientific research, or at least I was trying to go that route. So I want to make sure that their answer is supported. So then I asked them to draw the flag. So they had to draw the flag with all the parts. And I highlighted here in this image the parts and the colors that I was expecting them to include, which are the two bands, they're red and white, the 5 stars, they're white, and the white crescent moon. Starting with the colors, most of them got the colors correctly. I would even include this 30% in having correct answers, mainly because it just seemed like they knew that was the color, but just forgot to write, oh, this is red, this is white. But obviously the results are the results. But I can tell you guys, I would write there that 81% of them got all the colors correctly. As far as the symbolism, a lot of them did get a lot of the symbolism correctly. It was very interesting because observing them fill out this survey made me realize that they actually knew the symbolism. Obviously, in that environment, it is a little bit tense, and you're like, oh my God, what happens if I answer incorrectly, especially being in Singapore. So I could see a little bit of that stress, but overall, visually, you can tell that they knew, they just weren't getting the answers. But again, we are considering the numbers that we're seeing. So again, not a lot of high percentages in any of these categories. I highlighted the highest percentage in females, which was 15%, provided an incorrect or an incomplete answer. So what this means was that they added like 3 of the 5 stars. They forgot to include the red color and things like that. And then in the males, 11% got all the symbolisms right. But again, not significant variance to actually say they fully understand the symbolism. Now, the interesting part, which I think it was what I was looking the most for in this research, is how they felt towards their national flag. Because again, I started this presentation talking about nationalism, patriotism, specifically that banal nationalism. So I was very surprised to see that most of them in this ranking that I provided said that the flag was important to them. So that's 43%. If we include that 22% that said it is very important, we have over 60% of the students saying that the flag is really important to them. But regardless of what you guys are seeing here in the results, the interesting part was when they were asked to write about what the flag means to them, because even individuals that didn't provide an answer or that said that they didn't care actually provided a lot of these adjectives and qualities that you would expect to see when individuals are talking about how they feel towards their national flag in a positive way. So we see a lot of words here, but I want to get your focus on the words that came up the most. So in this word cloud, you're seeing the bigger words represented as being the words that were repetitive, the ones that students kept saying the most. So they associate the flag with identity, with their country, the word national, which tied a lot into their birthplace. This is my nation. This is where I come from, basically. So taking all of those results into consideration, we can start developing these discussions and coming up with these conclusions that will give us an understanding, at least with this group of participants, of how is that sense of nationalism towards the flag in Singapore. And overall, I can say I was very satisfied with the results because, as I mentioned when I referenced Scott Winter's findings with his study, this is definitely a key addition to that literature that is still in development within vexillology, specifically within Singapore. There's not a lot of research being done specifically when it comes to this. And overall, throughout these answers, Singaporean students show that they know, for the most part, we did see that 1% or 2% that didn't, but for the most part, they do know their national symbol, in this case, the flag. For the most part, it is something that they see as a valuable and an important symbol for them. It also highlights these findings about Singaporeans that emphasize their conservative and very structured nature. It also emphasizes the, let's call it the good job that the government is doing in promoting these elements, specifically with the overload of exposure they get throughout the National Day celebrations, which I discussed is like 3 months, it's not just a day. And although the symbolism knowledge varied, it is evident that Singaporeans, in this case students, can definitely identify their national symbols. Obviously, I'm not talking in this paper or presentation about their educational background, but the flag is also part of their educational curriculum throughout our equivalent of K to 12, which in their case, it's a little bit longer than 12th grade. And it also showed that even when the students were providing incorrect answers, it still highlighted the values that Singapore as a nation wants to incorporate in their individuals, which positively highlighted this banal nationalism that Michael Billig was referring to. So while it is known that flags convey different messages to different individuals, we can see with these results that for the most part, as I said, even when students said the flag doesn't mean anything to me, I feel neutral, I don't care, it still had a positive sense of patriotism when it came to understanding how they felt about it. So it's very positive. And again, it could highlight some of this influence that the government has in their individuals. So overall, with these results, we can say that the Singaporean flag is serving its purpose as acting as a symbol of nationhood. But obviously, the work here is not done. So like I said, as with any research, there are limitations, there are uncertainties, there are things that we can continue doing to improve this. So obviously, I would want to expand that target population. I would like to explore correlations of this nationalism towards other national symbols, maybe explore more in depth the core of the Singaporeans' feelings towards national symbols, and establishing stronger connections between flag knowledge and patriotism, which I'm not only doing in Singapore, but in other locations. So that's it for my presentation, but I do want to acknowledge and thank NAVA because this research was partially funded by the 2017 grant that I received, the Devereux Cannon Jr. grant. So thank you for that. And as I mentioned, all ethical considerations were approved by the National University of Singapore. Thank you.
What happens if someone displays the flag outside that 3-month window you were talking about?
That's a great question. If you would have asked me this when I was doing all of this research in 2017 and 2018, I would have had the specific answer, but I would assume it's probably a fine. And again, talking about that obedient nature that Singaporeans have, I can guarantee you no one is going to do it. But like I said, I assume there is some kind of fine if they do, but off the top of my head, I cannot remember.
Okay. Is there any kind of a salute or something done in schools? You know, like in the United States, you do the Pledge of Allegiance when you're facing the flag, those kind of things, place your hand over your heart. Is there anything similar in Singapore?
Yes, they have a really cool song you can look for in YouTube. I don't know the name, but it has a lot of, it repeats the word Singapore a lot. But you can look it up in YouTube. It's a nice song. They usually do it with primary school kids. So obviously ages like 5 to 10. But yes, there's certainly a lot of that.
Okay. And a couple of folks have asked, do you plan to do the same kind of thing in Puerto Rico, and maybe even once you do that, compare the two, maybe contrast the two?
Yes, absolutely. And I presented this, the pilot study I did in Puerto Rico in the 2015 NAVA meeting, I think. That article is published, but it was a pilot study. It's a very small sample size. But yes, I'm certainly going to start doing that probably in the fall in Puerto Rico. And then eventually I do want to redo it again in Singapore, asking more specific questions. So of course, this gave me an opportunity to see where I can expand more on. But yes.
Got it. Okay. We've only got a few moments here, but just to let you know, if you check the comment, the chat box, please, because there's an individual that would like to see more details on your report. Your results, and apparently they're a survey researcher themselves, and so they're interested in, I guess, how you did it, what you got, and the granularity that maybe you couldn't cover today.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, we need to move on. There's a couple other questions, but Carlos, thank you very much for presenting your research and the results that you obtained while you were there.